You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozar. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday the 1st of November 2013. Charlene Downes Murder hunt reopened. Afghan Taliban hung the limbs of our friends from trees. Illegal immigrants cost taxpayer more than 4,000 a head each year. Netherlands whistleblowing civil servant sacked over mosque boarding house leaks. EU set to monitor intolerant citizens. Greece, thousands protest in Athens over new tax. Nick Griffin MEP, who talks today about Charlene on the 10th anniversary of her disappearance. Forbes says Putin more powerful than Barack Obama. Pentagon training manual, white males have unfair advantages. 3-year-old Saudi girl gang raped. Thought for the day, an unbalanced media gives unbalanced stories. And finally, banned from Sainsbury's. First to Kugelschreiber. Loved the Woad song, not a dry seat in the house with that one. And Dave SA, non-metallic blue eyeshadow works well for me instead of Woad. But it was a bit rainy last night, so should have made it waterproof gunk. UK news. Charlene Downes murder hunt reopened. Lancashire police have announced they are reopening their investigation into the unsolved murder of 14-year-old Charlene Downes, who went missing on November the 1st, 2003. A new senior investigating officer has been assigned to Charlene's case full-time, along with a team of specialist officers. They will also investigate the disappearance of 15-year-old Paige Shivers in August 2007. Lancashire Police Assistant Chief Constable Andy Rhodes said, "We know that people are more confident in coming forward to report historic information nowadays, and this may be the case here." Charlene and Paige's friends, obviously just teenagers at the time they went missing, will now be grown up and may have their own children. I would hope that they may be more confident now in coming forward and telling us what they may know. The British National Party BNP has organised a memorial for Charlene and will hold a Justice for Charlene demonstration in Blackpool on Saturday the 2nd of November 2013. World at 8. After 5 years the police are giving the appearance of looking into Charlene's murder. Murder is the one thing all the national media agreed upon. Charlene has not just disappeared. One has to just love the Daily Mail and the Times. Both are claiming, according to police reports and witness statements, that Charlene was abused by 100 men, most of whom were white, and are wanted for questioning by the police. Since everyone seems to agree that Charlene was murdered, it stands to reason that everyone knows who murdered her. Also, why weren't the 100 white men interviewed 10 years ago? Why? Because they don't exist. Afghan Taliban hung the limbs of our friends from trees, says Marine accused of killing captive. 3 Royal Marines accused of executing a wounded prisoner in Afghanistan had been sickened by the Taliban hanging limbs of maimed comrades in trees as trophies, a court-martial heard. Tensions had built up before the killing after insurgents paraded the body parts of close colleagues blown up by improvised explosive devices. The gruesome detail emerged as one of the commandos admitted he was ashamed of shooting the captured enemy in the chest at point-blank range with a 9mm pistol. But the experienced sergeant, who could only be identified as Marine A, insisted he believed the gunman was already dead when he pulled the trigger. He blamed lack of self-control and poor judgment for the spur-of-the-moment decisions sparked by pent-up emotions. In one instance, a respected officer and second colleague were killed and others badly wounded in a roadside bombed strike. Some of the injured men's limbs were not recovered and were picked up by the Taliban and hung in trees as a kind of trophy for the world to see. He said that atrocity had quite a harsh effect on the Marines. World at 8 states, "If an enemy fears you, then your battle is won. If you fear them, it isn't. These soldiers should be commended for their behaviour. I wouldn't have been so restrained seeing bits of my fellow soldiers hung up like a halal killing house." Illegal immigrants cost taxpayers more than £4,000 a head each year. A Home Office report reveals illegal immigrants cost the public purse up to £4,250 and disclosed the controversial Go Home ad vans were more successful than previously thought. It means the total cost of the public purse could be up to £3.7 billion a year, based on previous estimates which said there were as many as 860,000 illegal immigrants in this country. The figure emerged in an official Home Office document which showed the government's controversial Go Home advertising campaign, which included ad vans touring the streets of multicultural areas, saved the taxpayer up to £830,000. Mark Harper, the Immigration Minister, disclosed the campaign was far more successful in persuading illegal immigrants to leave Britain than previously disclosed. He said 125 illegal immigrants came forward after seeing the publicity, of whom 60 have already left the country. Mr Harper said the 60 voluntary departures represented a notional saving of £830,000 based on the average £15,000 cost of an enforced removal. European news. Netherlands, whistleblowing civil servant sacked over mosque boarding house leaks. A Rotterdam civil servant who leaked confidential information about fire safety at a mosque-run boarding houses for children in the city has been sacked and faces legal action. The civil servant also secretly recorded conversations about the situation and sent them to various media, along with council documents, the city council claims. The man has been sacked for seriously failing in his duties and breaking the civil service code of conduct. The case has now come to light because the whistleblower refused to accept being sacked and given 1 year's unemployment benefit. The government has since introduced tougher standards for mosque boarding houses and charged local councils with making sure they do not break the rules. World at 8 comments. In the UK he would have been shot and compensation paid to the mosque owners. EU set to monitor intolerant citizens. Controlling social behaviour, proposal could ban criticism of Islam and feminism. A frightening proposal currently being considered by the European Parliament would direct governments to monitor citizens deemed intolerant and could even lead to a ban on all criticism of Islam and feminism. The European Framework National Statute for the Promotion of Tolerance, which was drafted by the European Council on Tolerance and Reconciliation, an NGO based in Paris, was presented to the European Parliament's Civil Liberties Committee last month and is thought to be on the verge of implementation. According to the Gatestone Institute, the statute represents an unparalleled threat to free speech and would have the impact of effectively shutting down the right to free speech in Europe by banning all critical scrutiny of Islam and Islamic Sharia law, a key objective of Muslim activist groups for more than 2 decades. World at 8. This is a complete nonsense. After all, Islam is in itself a criticism of feminism, isn't it? Greece, thousands protest in Athens over new tax. Thousands of anti-austerity protesters clogged the Greek capital's streets Thursday to demonstrate against government plans to introduce a new property tax as bailout lenders prepare to conduct another inspection next week. Parliament is due to vote next week on proposals to replace an emergency property tax included on electricity bills with a permanent levy, breaking a pledge made last year by the Conservative-led coalition government. More than 50 Conservative lawmakers are demanding changes to proposals, arguing they unfairly burden their rural constituents. The government is also planning new cuts to state benefits and the public workforce. I now hand you over to Nick Griffin MEP, who talks today about Charlene Downes and the reopening of this case and much more.
There's only one story for me to cover today, and that's the fact that today is the 10th anniversary of the disappearance and murder of Charlene Downes in Blackpool. I'm sure the facts of the appalling Charlene Downes case are well known to everyone listening, so I won't go into them at length, other than to remind you, or perhaps tell anyone who is absolutely new to this, that Charlene disappeared having been groomed by a Muslim grooming gang that was operating and targeting dozens of young girls in Blackpool out of various takeaway food places. 2 men were arrested for her murder and tried. The case collapsed owing to police incompetence in handling the evidence, but the police said that they were not looking for anybody else. The court had been played secretly made tape recordings of the 2 men discussing how they'd raped and murdered Charlene and disposed of her body in kebabs. Despite all this, in the end, those two men were compensated to the tune of about £250,000 each for having been tried. Worse than that, Charlene's family have been most appallingly treated by the police throughout, including most outrageously, the police arresting her grandmother for the crime of sitting outside the shop of one of the alleged killers, peacefully, quietly, handing out leaflets, wearing a t-shirt simply saying, "Justice for Charlene." Doreen Lawrence is now a peer of the realm, sitting in the House of Lords for her campaign for justice for her son. I don't, and I don't think anyone, denies her the right to campaign for justice, and in fact one has to admire the fact that she stuck at it and she got it. But what on earth is going on that one mother of a racial attack victim ends up in the House of Lords, whereas the other one ends up getting enforcement notices from the police to stop her protesting about the injustice and about the police incompetence in handling the case? This really is an outrage. The outrage has got more in the last day. We heard late on Wednesday about a press conference taking place in Manchester about the reopening of the Charlene Downes and Paige Chivers case. Paige is another girl, also a young teenager, who disappeared about the same time, having been hanging around in the same shops. The press conference, we were told, was in Manchester on Thursday morning. It turns out the public are said to have been invited, but Karen Downes, Charlene's campaigning mother, wasn't even told about it. She had, just as she found out about the details of how her daughter was murdered from the press, so this time Karen had to find out about the fact the police are reopening the case from us through a leak from somewhere near to Manchester Police. Can you imagine what would have happened if the family of Stephen Lawrence had been treated in such a despicable way by the police? Still, see, when you're white, nobody cares. At least it is now in the media. It's on the Times front page today. Andrew Norfolk, who writes the article, sat through both of my trials for talking about grooming, which I did, as you know, back in 2004 when I was arrested for it. And he denied or covered up what I was saying about Muslim grooming gangs at the time. Since then, he's become a champion, supposedly, of exposing what's going on, and to be fair, he's done quite a good job. But never once has he acknowledged the fact that it was the British National Party and me who raised this long before he and the Times thought of it or dared to touch it. Similarly, the Times has stayed silent for years as we've worked and our activists have worked relentlessly to highlight the case. The Times has said nothing about the fact that I raised it in Parliament. And while the Times today says that it's wrong that the anniversary memorial service in Blackpool for Charlene is being organised by the British National Party, well, why is it wrong? Because where were the Times when it happened? What's the Times been doing about this case? They weren't there and they've done nothing. Where was the Times when I raised it in Parliament? Silent. The Times and the British mass media, of course, aren't the only people who portrayed Charlene Downes and her family. Tommy Robinson stabbed the family in the back because they welcomed British National Party involvement in the campaign for justice. When that happened, Robinson and his clique, then running the EDL, launched a vicious smear campaign against the entire family and ordered people not to take part in any demonstrations for justice on their behalf. Well, that smear campaign didn't put us off. I'd like to note also that several of the North West infidels, now in prison in Liverpool under outrageous circumstances, also played an active role in bringing their people into the campaign with us. And thanks to them, and thanks to all who've turned up, from the British National Party, from the infidels, from the EDL members who didn't listen to the lies of Tommy Robinson, from everybody who's got involved in the long campaign for justice for Charlene Downes. Of course, we're not there yet, but this now is real progress. It's in the media. The case has been reopened. I think the key of why that's happened goes back to a few months ago when BNP TV did a brilliant doorstepping of Nazir Afzal, who's the Northwest head of the Crown Prosecution Service. He admitted there on camera, and it's on BNP TV there, and it's very effective, he admitted that the minute he'd seen this case when he came into office, he knew there was something seriously wrong with it. He said at the time that he couldn't reopen it was up to the police. Well, I don't know, but clearly that shook things up. Something has now happened. And now we're told there is a new police inquiry. It's a little bit odd that, because we had been told that the case had never been closed. Well, it clearly was, because if it hadn't been closed, this wouldn't be a new police inquiry, would it? But let's not complain. We've got, and I really do mean we've got, because it's the British National Party and Karen Downes who've secured this new police inquiry. Nobody else. If it hadn't been for us, for our party, for our activists, and for Karen Downes' bravery, if it hadn't been for that, this case would have been forgotten. But now we've got it opened again, and that's really, really good news. I want to close with one particular special thanks, and that's to Margaret Walker, a lady in her 70s down on the south coast, who's been arrested in a dawn raid and hauled through the courts, brutally, appallingly treated, for the crime of writing to MPs and councillors about the Charlene Downes case. Well, Margaret, I know you paid off the fine. I know that you're campaigning again and writing, and I hope you're listening to this, because it's you and people like you who've made this amazing breakthrough possible, whereby now we've got this new police inquiry. Charlene's family, on the very day, the anniversary of her death and their great tragedy, now know that there's really seriously now a chance for justice. We're not there yet, but it's a tremendous achievement, and thanks to all who've made it possible.
Thank you, Nick. Quite right about both Norfolk and the Times. World news. Forbes says Putin more powerful than Barack Obama. Russian President Vladimir Putin is more powerful than the United States President Barack Obama, according to Forbes magazine, as Obama comes second. In its 2013 list of the world's most powerful people, released Wednesday, Forbes said that it put Putin at the top of the list because he so frequently shows his strength at home and on the global stage. Pope Francis was fourth on the list, after China's Xi Jinping, while German Chancellor Angela Merkel was fifth, and Italian Mario Draghi, President of the European Central Bank, ranked ninth on the list of 72. Interestingly, Forbes thinks David Cameron belongs at number 11. World at 8. Anyone is more powerful than Obama, half white, half black and wholly Muslim. Cameron doesn't even rate 11th in my book. Pentagon Training Manual. White males have unfair advantages. A controversial 600-page plus manual used by the military to train its equal opportunity officers teaches that healthy white heterosexual Christian men hold an unfair advantage over other races, and warns in great detail about a so-called white male club. Simply put, a healthy white heterosexual Christian male receives many unearned advantages of social privilege, whereas a black homosexual atheist female in poor health receives many unearned disadvantages of social privilege, reads a statement in the manual created by the Defence Equal Opportunity Management Institute. The manual, which was obtained by Fox News, also instructs troops to support the leadership of people of colour. Do this consistently but not uncritically, the manual states. World at 8. OK, so what benefits mankind or civilization? A fit, white, educated male or a black, illiterate lesbian female? Now that is a quandary, isn't it? Duh! 3-year-old Saudi girl gang raped. Several men abducted a 3-year-old Saudi girl and took turns in raping her before dumping the child near a hospital in a serious condition. Disclosing the crime on Monday, police said they had arrested 3 suspects and 2 women, and that more could be arrested in connection with the rape. Doctors at the hospital in the Western Red Sea port of Jeddah said the child was found crying and in serious condition in front of the hospital on Ramadan 13, adding that she's still in the intensive care unit struggling for her life. World at 8. Poor little creature. I've always been ambivalent about adult or late teenage rapes of one-on-one, do excuse the pun, but gang rapes and the rape of little babies is one thing that really gets me going. The Saudis should arrange a public stoning of these men and women and film it and allow it to be shown all over the world, and make the stoning very slow with smaller stones to last longer. The child's family should watch as well and throw the first stone. Thought for the day. Media blackouts, why, and the results for the UK. Nick Griffin MEP has recently commented on the vast media blackout that the British National Party have been subjected to over the last 5 years, which has, in all honesty, impacted on the party, but the one thing about fighting injustice is acknowledging the source in the first place. Personally, I think I understand why this has occurred. At the end of 2010 we had 2 MEPs, several councillors, and despite the fact that we did well in the general elections, another fact which was never nationally mentioned, we were on the up in the electorate's eyes. That hit the mark as far as the establishment went, and they leapt into action. That is, implementing the Union of Journalists' creed of never mentioning any political group or party that was patriotic or nationalistic unless stating they are racists or worse. Now that ethos has worked very well in their favour for a long time, even into making our own members doubt their work and giving non-members the idea we've gone away. Well, we haven't. We have survived, and we will survive because we have been through our bad days, lost valuable people and been attacked by every big gun in the UK, but we are still here and still aggravating the media by maintaining our love of our country and most of its people. I'm surprised at the main political parties though, because whilst condemning us roundly at every titch and turn, they pinch our manifesto and even go so far as to pinch our logos and take the Union flag, which they have never used before, and making the edge tatty as we've done with the Union heart. Most of these parties have preferred roses, trees and torches in the past. Frankly, I'm surprised they don't all use a camel and a palm tree and just get it over with. But that aside, although the paraphrasing of our own well-known ideas are sickening, especially coming from people who apparently hate everything we stand for, it is good that at least most of the great British public do see now that the sentiments from the British National Party are only common sense and not racially motivated. This bias has hit the popular book media as well. Many UK authors previously untouched by bias are now leaping on the politically correct bandwagon against the BNP. I was ploughing through one the other day and there on a page was a truly biased sentiment. The heroine, a female vicar, said to her pal, "Questioning the impact of social change isn't quite the same as joining the British National Party." Prat is what I thought, and a biased prat at that. Why not the quote, "quite as same as joining the Communist Party"? There was a one-page spread in the Mail yesterday covering the untimely death of a young Sri Lankan in Sheffield. Thavisha Peris, 25, was found dead in a car whilst delivering pizzas from a Domino's pizza. Now, although this young man's death is a tragedy, there is an undercurrent of "why was he over here" thought from me. Now I know he came over from Sri Lanka in 2011 to complete his education. His family, including his brother who is a software engineer, are all back in Sri Lanka. Thavisha had got a job from a fellow Sri Lankan who runs Domino's along with other Sri Lankans probably, 4 of whom have just left the company now. Isn't that rather odd? He also just got a job as an IT consultant and lived with a bunch of other fellow countrymen in Sheffield. He was, as all people are when dead before their time, a thoroughly nice chappie and could well have been just that. My point being, when done being educated, why not return to his homeland and his adoring family and make a life and career out there? The mere fact that a Sri Lankan is running a franchise like Domino's and only employing fellow countrymen is bad enough, but Thavisha has got a job in the UK which has not gone to a British citizen, and no one is going to tell me that there were no white male students who had studied computers at Sheffield Hallam University who had not applied for this position. I'm also under the impression, perhaps wrongly, that foreign students on a student visa were not allowed to work or settle in the UK. There is no description of the attackers and the police believe the killing occurred in the car itself, owned by Domino's. In fact, the whole thing is suspect to me and reeks of a personal or a turf killing. The Mail's huge spread only confirms their bias, as there had been virtually nothing on the young American guy in July who was so severely beaten up and glassed by a group of Asians, read Muslims, patrolling areas of our country that he will be disfigured for life. My thoughts are with Thavisha's parents of course, but it would appear that every time an ethnic is killed they are always practically saints, and yet when one of our own is murdered, as in the case of Charlene Downes, there is no body, suspects are allowed to go free and paid off, and when the police do reopen the case, which is what they are doing now, 10 years too late, the Times especially is printing various and unproven nasties about the poor child and her family. No Stephen Lawrence sainthood here, or baronetcy for Charlene's mother, oh no. So the media printing by trial are setting themselves up as judge, jury and executioner, as they have done with all nationalistic and patriotic groups and parties. However, not so with Sinn Féin, oh no. We have Gerry Adams sipping tea with the Queen no less, and he arranged for her uncle Mountbatten to be killed along with a young nephew. So all is forgiven now, is it? Now I know that we treated the Irish disgustingly in the past and have heard many sides of the stories, but two wrongs do not a right make, and although we cannot turn back the clock on Cromwell, the Puritan terrors, William of Orange or the RUD, we can stay true to some innocents who died in vain and not take an IRA terrorist into the heart of our parliament. But then, saying that, we British seem to take Muslim terrorists and African monsters into the fold, so why not? Let them all come along and stick their noses into our troughs like the pigs they are, and that is an insult to pigs. I like pigs. Pigs rule. Talking about sticking noses in troughs, a thought occurred to me on why we have strong anti-immigration policies as a party, and although other parties, especially near elections, seem to whisper them out to the sheeples, the British National Party would, if in power, implement them fairly and squarely. And among the very good reasons to do so is the fact that every single illegal immigrant and immigrants unknown to the authorities, and there are millions, take up the same space, air and facilities that we British take up in our own land. Now this presents a problem in itself. We are not the size of America, Russia, China, India or even the united land masses of Europe. We are a very small island in the North Sea and Atlantic, and up to the last few years our only natural barrier was the English Channel. That of course was put paid to by France, the EU and a Conservative government. A few facts are: it was originally designed by Albert Mathieu in 1802, obviously to help the invasion of England by France, and still working that way. It is 31 miles long and built by the Trans-Manche Link. I have two accounts of exactly how much this bit of terrorism cost. One site says $21 billion and the other says $12 billion. It was started in 1984, the year of Big Brother is watching you, and opened to the public in 1994. The only reason it was built was like the HS2 through Bucks, to facilitate the movement not of our troops, goods or working people, but immigrants, legal and illegal. As our stats for immigration have soared since this channel was built, and indeed all our facilities, educational, health and food, have been under threat during and since its building. I am reminded of the actual cost to the taxpayers in the clearing out of a gigantic mass of filth consisting of babies' nappies, soft wipes and bodily waste out of a sewer in central London a few months ago, and if you'd seen the pictures even the most liberal Marxist twat would have heaved. Our baby population is going down, so at least 80% of this waste was immigrant waste, and the sooner we understand that most, if not all, our immigrants produce copious amounts of babies, to this add hospital services, educational and further educational services, food, jobs and even air, and not only is this country too full at the moment, but we are the most densely populated country in Europe, and it is with immigrants, both from Europe and from countries that do not have immigration policies for us to return the favour. It is one-way traffic, and it is deadly. And frankly the journalists should be concentrating, if allowed, on the fact of this exterior inflicted genocide more than primping around some ethnic killed whilst over here taking advantage of our systems that seem to encourage it. We are supposed to be civilised in the UK, so why are we not acting that way? It is an uncivilised society that encourages and pays foreigners to come over, live, work and breed in a culture alien to them, and who moreover are alien to the people they come to live amongst. That is not civilised behaviour any more than the archaic attitude of our media and papers. The media should think more of its own country and people than peoples from thousands of miles away who all come from their own countries of birth to ruin our country of birth. It isn't racist to worry or put your own country and people first. It is civilised, and it's what built strong nations in the past, not the influx of huge amounts of strangers into a country to destroy it from within by sheer numbers, culminating in the breakdown of that nation's socio-economic structures and just about everything else. A point to remember is that the vast majority of these immigrants come from countries with no running water, no lavatories, little food and no public or municipal services, let alone financial handouts. So of course they're going to keep coming to the UK and make the most of everything we have to offer, and they're going to overuse a vast amount of items that we are used to because they are not. The result? A breakdown in everything because of too many demands on everything. That isn't racism, it's a fact. If you cannot see the problem, you're part of that problem, and the establishment's problem is that we nationalists see and understand that problem. And finally, banned from Sainsbury's. Didn't like shopping there anyway. Yesterday I was at my local Sainsbury's store buying a large bag of Winalot dog food for my loyal pet and was in the checkout queue when a woman behind me asked if I had a dog. What did she think I had, an elephant? So since I'm retired and have little to do, on impulse I told her that no, I didn't have a dog. I was starting the Winalot diet again. I added that I probably shouldn't because I ended up in hospital last time, but I'd lost 2 stone before I woke up in intensive care with tubes coming out of most of my orifices and IVs in both arms. I told her that it was essentially a perfect diet and that the way it works is to load your pockets with Winalot nuggets and simply eat 1 or 2 every time you feel hungry. The food is nutritionally complete, so it works well, and I was going to try it again. I have to mention here that practically everyone in the queue was now enthralled with my story. Horrified, she asked me if I ended up in intensive care because the dog food poisoned me. I told her no, I stepped off the curb to sniff an Irish setter's arse and a car hit me. I thought the guy behind her was going to have a heart attack, he was laughing so hard. I'm now banned from Sainsbury's. Better watch what you ask, retired people. This presenter says, the old ones are the good ones. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozar, and I and the team at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you all a very happy and a very safe weekend. Also investigate the disappearance of 15-year-old Paige Shivers in August 2007. Lancashire Police Assistant Chief Constable Andy Rhodes said, "We know that people are more confident in coming forward to report historic information nowadays, and this may be the case here." Charlene and Paige's friends, obviously just teenagers at the time they went missing, will now be grown up and may have their own children. I would hope that they may be more confident now in coming forward and telling us what they may know. The British National Party BNP has organised a memorial for Charlene and will hold a Justice for Charlene demonstration in Blackpool on Saturday the 2nd of November 2013. World at 8. After 5 years, the police are giving the appearance of looking into Charlene's murder. Murder is the one thing all the national media agreed upon. Charlene has not just disappeared. One has to just love the Daily Mail and the Times. Both are claiming, according to police reports and witness statements, that Charlene was abused by 100 men, most of whom were white, and are wanted for questioning by the police. Since everyone seems to agree that Charlene was murdered, it stands to reason that everyone knows who murdered her. Also, why weren't the 100 white men interviewed 10 years ago? Why? Because they don't exist. Afghan Taliban hung the limbs of our friends from trees, says Marine accused of killing captive. 3 Royal Marines accused of executing a wounded prisoner in Afghanistan had been sickened by the Taliban hanging limbs of maimed comrades in trees as trophies, a court-martial heard. Tensions had built up before the killing after insurgents paraded the body parts of close colleagues blown up by improvised explosive devices. The gruesome detail emerged as one of the commandos admitted he was ashamed of shooting the captured enemy in the chest at point-blank range with a 9mm pistol. But the experienced sergeant, who could only be identified as Marine A, insisted he believed the gunman was already dead when he pulled the trigger. He blamed lack of self-control and poor judgment for the spur-of-the-moment decisions sparked by pent-up emotions. In one instance, a respected officer and second colleague were killed and others badly wounded in a roadside bombed strike. Some of the injured men's limbs were not recovered and were picked up by the Taliban and hung in trees as a kind of trophy for the world to see. He said that atrocity had quite a harsh effect on the Marines. World at 8 states, "If an enemy fears you, then your battle is won. If you fear them, it isn't. These soldiers should be commended for their behaviour. I wouldn't have been so restrained seeing bits of my fellow soldiers hung up like a halal killing house." Illegal immigrants cost taxpayers more than £4,000 a head each year. A Home Office report reveals illegal...
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozar. The World at 8, the #1 in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday the 1st of November 2013. Charlene Downes murder hunt reopened. Afghan Taliban hung the limbs of our friends from trees. Illegal immigrants cost taxpayer more than $4,000 a head each year. Netherlands whistleblowing civil servant sacked over mosque boarding house leaks. EU set to monitor intolerant citizens. Greece, thousands protest in Athens over new tax. Nick Griffin MEP, who talks today about Charlene on the 10th anniversary of her disappearance. Forbes says Putin more powerful than Barack Obama. Pentagon training manual, white males have unfair advantages. 3-year-old Saudi girl gang raped. Thought for the day, an unbalanced media gives unbalanced stories. And finally, banned from Sainsbury's. First to Kugelschreiber. Loved the Woad song, not a dry seat in the house with that one. And Dave SA, non-metallic blue eyeshadow works well for me instead of Woad. But it was a bit rainy last night, so should have made it waterproof gunk. UK News. Charlene Downes murder hunt reopened. Lancashire police have announced they are reopening their investigation into the unsolved murder of 14-year-old Charlene Downes, who went missing on November the 1st, 2003. A new senior investigating officer has been assigned to Charlene's case full-time, along with a team of specialist officers. They will